So from my point of view, I choose to look at this technology as something that can enable me to spend more time with the ones that I love in real life.
Welcome to Building Better Worlds. Our mission here is simple: to explore how the innovations of Web3 can deliver on its potential to build a sustainable, more equitable world.
Hi, and welcome to Better Worlds podcast. I am your host, Julian Guderlei, and I'm here today with Emma Ridderstad out of Sweden and the founder and CEO of Warpin, a builder of VR and AR environments. And I'm super excited to have this conversation about Web3, the metaverse, and all things digital with you today, Emma.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting because your company has created environments for Magic Leap, and you're deeply in the possibility and the potential of what we can actually build out of the digital environment, much more so than just the hype over it. And so I'm excited for you to share some of your insights and some of your knowledge around that. But maybe let's start just with your passion for that space. Like, what is it that made you truly like hooked into that space of realizing, well, virtual reality and augmented reality are spaces where we can unfold more creativity and bring out more of that?
Well, to start off with, I'm an ex-gamer. I used to play a lot of video games when I was younger. It was a great passion of me. So I came in contact with these technologies back in the 90s, but it was pretty early back then. So I kind of decided even then that when the computing power has, reached this type of level where we can actually start working with these technologies, I will work with them. Because for me, going from a 2D space to a 3D space opens up a whole new way for us to communicate and to learn and to socialize with each other. So it's like the last technological renaissance that we're really into. So for me, it has just been a passion of mine to use technology for enhancing the human experience and not be owned by technology as we are in many cases, I would say, in 2D.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit on the 2D, 3D kind of comparison? Like, so 2D being, let's say, a cell phone that you look at, right? And then 3D
Yes.
being the immersive environment that you step into.
Yes. And to give you like a metaphor for it, I remember I was working at a magazine when internet kind of came and everyone was like, oh, we need a homepage, we need to be online. And what a lot of magazines did, what they did, they pushed in the magazine and you could flip one page like this online. That is like not using the technology for what it's good for. And I was afraid that we were going to make almost the same mistakes when we're going from 2D into 3D, because 2D is a very flat screen, to your point. It's a laptop, it's a television, it's a cell phone. But immersive technologies through virtual and augmented reality enables you to walk into an environment and to actually work and to socialize the way that you would do in this real world, as close to as you could. So the biggest, I think, differentiations between 2D and 3D is that this is our much more native environment for us.
Got it. Yeah, beautifully put. So your background is as a gamer, right? Is that also the origin of the name Warpin? Because I think that's connected to Super Mario Brothers, if I'm not mistaken, no?
Yes, that's true. I have some of the most memorable memories with my siblings and friends playing Mario Kart. And we just love that of going to, you've warped into a whole different world and sometimes a much better world than the world you came from. So we just love that that saying that you warp somewhere. So that's where the company names come from, Warpin.
Warpin, going from one place to the other in light
Yes.
speed. Got it. Okay. Really cool. Okay. So, the 2D, 3D element, I think, is one of those missed chances in the early internet days, right? Is just repeating kind of these 2D environments. And, I know you have quite a few opinions actually on the future of the internet, the future of Web3, and also, the metaverse. Do you mind going like a little deeper in kind of elaborating on what you think is more like the current hype and the shiny objects in front of us, and what is here to stay, and in which form it's here to stay?
Well, I think that we have this tech truth kind of, right, that goes in every technological leap we do. And in the beginning, we always overestimate things, and that's with shiny new things. And in the long term, we always underestimate things, and that is through business models and way that we, communicate and what will happen. And I think what we're seeing right now, a lot of in the metaverse hype, is of course NFTs and creators economy and things like that. And I have no doubt in my mind that the whole NFT era is coming and it's going to change a lot. But I think that the real benefits for humanity will be in education and training and communication with each other, because that is what this technology actually gives us, I would say, more than previous. And of course, NFTs and all of that, it's very beginning of what I think it will become in the future. So it's also right now not very sustainable, I would say. I mean, 96% of all NFTs, I think, is done by Ethereum. And they have a very, high-end script protocol, which consumes a lot of energy, for example. So I know that these things are always changing and developing forward. But what will really stay, I think, is the way that we learn and the way that we take in information and the way that we can share information with each other. And these new 3D worlds really, really enable us that. And I think that, not only do we have robotics, we have AI coming in, we need also, I think, to cultivate what makes us human. And what makes us human is creativity and empathy. And there is no better media for that than virtual and augmented reality, especially since you're 3.75 times more emotional connected to the content that you're experiencing in virtual reality. But you're also, engaging more senses, being able to really put yourself in someone else's shoes, for example, or try different things. So I have high hopes that this technology will actually bring people maybe more together again and not be that numb as we are through our televisions and our smartphones.
Yeah, very beautifully put. That, as we're developing more immersive technology experiences to highlight what actually makes us human, right? And to let that lead also. So Warpin has created a few different proprietary programs in the immersive kind of learning space. I'm curious about that specifically, immersive learning platforms, and you said like cross-cultural learning platforms where people can really meet on a deeper level. Can you share a bit about that and then what's kind of special about it?
Yeah, so in the base we have, because every new technology kind of, it takes a lot of effort from clients because you need to build the software, you need to have the hardware, you need to have everything in line. But we have built this software platform as a base that works as an aggregator for your own content, you can say. So that's the first step, to make sure that it's cost efficient and that it helps customer being able to scale also within the organization. But what you can do with 3D, to your point, is that we have built a lot of different types of education and training. So I can just pick some. But for example, we're working with schools, for example, on bullying. And if you first be the person who gets bullied and see a day of her life with social media, with what happens with her at home, what happens with her at school, but then also you get to see it from another perspective. You get to be the bully. And then from their point of view, see what happens in school, what happens at home. You get so much more connected to the people and much more empathy and understanding, for example. But then you have a whole different type of experiences. For example, here in Sweden, working with elderly, it can take up to 1 year to get the sufficient training for lifting elderly, because you need to take 3 people out of work to train this. So instead, we have built simulators in virtual reality where you can practice this regardless of from where you are. So making sure that people get sufficient training, making sure that we work with empathy and make sure that we work with topics that really, really virtual and augmented reality is good at. So everything from, being in someone else's shoes to actually practicing some of elements you need to train for yourself, but also having difficult conversations with employees. Or, for example, if I know that I think in Sweden, or at least in Europe, the second thing that people are more afraid of after dying is public speaking. So to be able to stand in an auditorium with a big audience and just have that feeling, and to do your own presentation and have an audience that is well, informed or maybe not, and things like that, to be able to train those things that previously have been very costly for companies also to give to their employees.
Yeah, right on. I actually remember, now that you shared those examples, I remember one of my first memorable VR experiences. This is like a bunch of years ago now. I was at a very big event, and someone was showcasing this VR experience, and it was actually taking you into into a prison cell in Brazil. And the point of it was to showcase and create empathy for what actually happens in those spaces.
Yeah.
And once you were in that VR experience, like I remember felt claustrophobic. I definitely wanted to get out of it right away. And it was just like a 3-4 minute kind of video that played, but you really realize that, oh wow, this is beyond what I would even imagine in terms of how many people are in the same room, or like the sanitary experience, etc. And it ultimately just increased my empathy for the person who was sharing all of this with us, who went through one of those experiences and made it their life mission to create better circumstances. Now, this is a very niche example, but I actually remember it 5-6 years later from simply how much emotion was experienced by me and was brought up and created an insight that, as you said, I either wouldn't have been able to do that at all otherwise, or it would have been very costly to simulate that, right?
And to your point, I remember one of the first virtual reality experiences that I tried was going to a refugee camp and following a 5-year-old girl around her day. And I will never forget that. I have 2 little girls myself, and just to imagine living under those conditions and not being able to turn away your face, right? You're in a 360 environment. You can't really turn away from that. It's, I think, had a tremendous impact on me as well. So we can really use the technology to work by building experiences that put people together again, and to your point, raise empathy. I think that will be crucial in the future for humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very interesting part of, the metaverse. Now, Warpin is also really known for being one of the drivers of kind of the enterprise metaverse and leading brands in the way they use it. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and like how you're achieving that mission to bring the metaverse in a meaningful way to companies.
Well, I think it's you have to start off by letting clients know that there is no metaverse as we envision it yet. We have a lot of different building blocks, and we have a lot of different initiatives and pilots and tests within the metaverse. But there's no doubt, of course, in anyone's mind that the metaverse is hopefully going to be this envision of what we're seeing in front of us. But until we are there, we need also companies to be able to learn how to use the technology where there is return on investment at the moment. And by using it for training and education within companies, you're not only learning how to be in a metaverse, because a training simulator or a 360 environment where you get to do things is much like those metaverse experiences that will be in the future. Because, the metaverse is internet in the future, but in 3D. So by helping companies have return on investment today, also, builds a strong case for investing in the metaverse in the future. So often it's about talking to the client, letting them know that you don't need to buy NFTs or lands in Decentraland at the moment, but you need to learn how to use the technology. So by using the technology inside the companies, training their staff, reducing work-related injuries with up to 45%, have a retention of 70%, have reduced their work-related costs with 80%. it really showcases what this technology will do. And what's interesting also is that companies who use this technology for their own training are also getting much more ideas on how they can use the metaverse in their own operations, because people who work in the companies all of a sudden get these ideas on how they can use the technology in the space that they are in. So we're always advising our companies at the moment to start working and start testing ideas within the metaverse, but do it at a pace where you can actually have return on investment.
Yeah, I flagged one of the sentences you said there. This was a really great elaboration on how to kind of educate companies also into this. But what you said there was the metaverse, it doesn't exist yet. We have the building blocks. I'm paraphrasing what you said, right? And but it is the internet of the future. Like the internet we know won't exist in the same way in 20 years.
Yes.
And it's going to be three-dimensional. And I think that's what a lot of people maybe miss, that it's simply the evolution of the internet, right? Like we would have been a good line to start with too, because it's that simple. Like 30 years ago, no one could have imagined the web as we know it. I mean, maybe a handful of people could have imagined, but it would have been quite science fiction for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And despite the, controversies and risks that are definitely, I'd love to talk about them a little bit, like with data ownership, et cetera, that are, alive right now with the internet. It's created a possibility field of connection and a possibility field of insight for us as humanity. I would even say it like reflects somehow how we're already intricately connected with each other and the natural world.
Yeah.
So how do you, maybe let me sidestep here. How do you see, you've been working with people across the world, the adaptation for something like this in different countries is like, you're in a Nordic country yourself, like how are different countries receiving this future of the internet?
Well, I think it has been a journey. I would say we started this Warpin back in 2016, and it was a whole different type of communication with clients in general. You talked a lot about what virtual and augmented reality was, and the name metaverse was practically non-existent. Now we have a whole different area. Now clients is more stressed out that they feel like they have to enter the metaverse in one way or another, and they have to have a metaverse strategy. They know that they have to dip their toes in one way or another. I think it's going to be crucial for business going forward to have a metaverse strategy. So it has changed a lot in that sense. Clients are much more, I'd say, willing, especially here in the Nordics. We're also seeing a lot of clients that you maybe wouldn't think would enter the metaverse. For example, we have the Swedish Postal Service here in Sweden, who is using both virtual and augmented reality a lot. But you're seeing the big brands as Nike, Adidas, all of them are going in doing their things. But we are seeing in the business to business that it's starting to explode more in terms of seeing the benefits of using this technology in supply chains, in reducing time for things, collaborations, onboarding, all of that you can see. So also Asia is, of course, always a little bit ahead of us sometimes within companies really dipping their toes into this. But I feel like it's steady going more and more from all over the world, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about the risks a little bit too, or like what you see are, kind of the yellow or orange flags to stay away from. And you said it way earlier in this episode already, like we're still in the phase of really creating all of this, and Warpin is one of the drivers of that. So that's a good thing, meaning we can really avoid certain mistakes that we have made with the internet and centralized ownership or governmental ownership. So how do you see this as the CEO of such a large and meaningful company?
Well, we can always impact as much as we can, right? And to try and make sure that it's a safe environment and try to make sure that, regulations will be there. It's going to be something that not only governments will have the power to do. I think we need companies, academia, we need more of us to be involved in creating a safe environment. What I'm very passionate about also is, of course, getting more people to work in the metaverse. I think to your point before, we said the metaverse is going to reflect the world that we're living in or the world that we have created. And I think still it's about 96% are still male building the metaverse in that sense. So we're not only seeing, very heavy representation of half of the country, or the population, but we also need more people into this. So we're building something that makes sense for everyone. The red flags are, many, but I think that we will solve them as we go along. What is a crime in the metaverse? As a woman within gaming industry, I can say by own experience that it's not a very pleasant environment always to be in. And I think if we're going to create a metaverse, we cannot build just bubbles around us, as a lot of gaming companies do. We need to learn how to communicate again. And I feel we have lost almost an entire generation of how to communicate with other human beings. And I'm hoping that this will be one of the means for that. And then to your point, of course, who owns the data, to make sure that people know what this technology can do and the benefits, but also how to protect themselves.
Yeah, data ownership, is coming up as a topic in the last 20 years, basically, since the internet went, so across the world that literally, now we have I think almost 4 billion people online at any point, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever foresee, let's talk a bit about the trends in the next, 7 years ahead. Do you ever foresee something like data ownership to return to the individual rather than to the corporate entities that have built the internet as we know it? Or do you think that's kind of like a pipe dream?
Yeah, it's of course a dream that everyone would own their own data, but I see this switch of technology can also be a very good eye-opener for a lot of people. I myself am guilty to just agreeing to most of terms when I download an app. I have sometimes no idea what I'm giving away. But when you're in a 3D space, I think that we will think differently, or I'm hoping that we will think differently, because it will be so much more invasive. To your point before, if you get harassed online, it's one thing. It can be very traumatic. But if you're getting harassed, for example, in a meta space, that feels much, much, much more, because it's so close to real as you can come, right? So I think that being aware of those problems being needed to solve and to be able to speak about them more generally, I think that we need to do, everyone in this industry.
And so, in terms of, just to come back to kind of market acceptance and which part of what you've been developing gets accepted, where do you see the adaptation curve ahead the next years in front of us? I remember we talked about the enterprise metaverse and the companies using it to for the internal communication, for even HR or teaching people, right? We talked about just learning environments, like let's say the public speaking example. I think there was a project you guys did in Tokyo where people were able to design their own clothing in a VR, AR environment. Where do you see one of those breakthrough possibilities in the next 2, 3, 5 years where suddenly it really clicked for people? The internet has become three-dimensional, not just for the early adopters.
I think we need a couple of things to happen before that can happen. And I think we need an iPhone moment, right? We need someone to release hardware that's affordable, that looks okay, and that has great content. And I don't know, maybe Apple will be the iPhone moment also for the hardware industry, for virtual and augmented reality. We don't know yet. I think we need one of those things to happen. But then we also, I feel like right now where the technology is, it's where it's really benefiting companies. So for example, when smartphone came in the beginning, the first ones using them were salespeople who traveled because it was so much more easier for them to use the device. And then it just came. So we will have, I think, a similar adaptation of this technology. First of all, we need a headset that I think will have both virtual and augmented reality. Then we need some content that makes sense for it to use that technology instead of using our smartphone. I think that within retail, we will see the first big things coming and be used, not only for supply chain and how we work, but also as we're starting to see how we can try things on ourselves through our phones, for example, without having them, or put a sofa in the corner and see how it looks in your home, and so forth. So I think that retail will be the first industry, except gaming and entertainment, that will really kick off using this technology, because it saves not only money for people, but it also helps the decision of buying things. And to your point, we did in Tokyo when Star Wars premiered, we had in H&M stores these designer booths where you could take a t-shirt, a black t-shirt, and design it with your hands through augmented reality, making it a very fun experience. So I think that we will be using this technology in the beginning to also build brand and to build experience with brands. But not only does it, of course, give, in this case, Disney and H&M also, what was the most popular prints? What did people want to have on their t-shirts? So it can also provide new type of analytics to customers.
Yeah, very great example. I can imagine people being just in their own world in those moments, creating their own t-shirt or their own shoe or whatever it might be that just allows creativity to flow and at the same time to experience something new.
I think what companies need to really think about in this space, and if you're entering this space, is that you have to make the audience be part of creating. This is the era, I would say, of co-creating, because that is what this technology allows us to do in a new way. And I mean, we're human beings. We love to create. It's in our DNA. So to really use that, I think companies will have great advantages.
I love that you brought it back to that, because creativity and empathy are two of those main drivers for the work you do, right? We talked about it a little earlier already, but I agree. Like, we are creators of this world much more than just like consumers or passerby, right? And so, I mean, if a tool like virtual reality or augmented reality can help us understand that even better and can inspire us to do so more, it's definitely. Personally, I've seen a lot of the technological progress in the last decade or so with both like a very excited perspective and then also with quite a cautious perspective, mainly because of ownership and centralized control that is possible through a lot of technology these days. But at the core of it, the excitement comes back, because of this co-creative element and because of this opportunity to say, the world is physical and real and organic and natural, but the world is also digital. Like, there's not like, I mean, at least in my world, there's not a competition for which one remains. I think that they both exist, and they probably always have existed in a certain way. Maybe before we couldn't materialize the digital in the same way, but so it's a very interesting part.
Yeah, 100%. And I think to your point also, that people will demand different things going forward. When you have a space that is 3D, it's going to feel so much more like your space. So I'm also hoping that good things can come out of it, because no one will want ads, general ads in your 3D space, for example. So I think that we will see a lot of human invention power when it is at its best, hopefully also.
Yeah, and that's kind of, what a lot of us that are creators in the media space or the digital space or the web environment have been waiting for or hoping for quite a while, right? It's like the evolution of the way social media it had like a beautiful initial curve where everyone was like, this seems to be like the new thing, like let's create something with it. And then suddenly, as you said, like, from ads to the dopamine loops that you're in, that's not necessarily the end product that we all need to stay with for forever, right?
No,
How do you
100%.
Yeah, right. So how do you see that with young generations? You said you have two daughters at home as well. Like, how perhaps, like, how you can advise younger members of this audience as well. Like, how does somebody pragmatically use empathy and creativity in this kind of context to build their own life, to build their own career, to enter maybe even the work world if someone is in that situation?
Well, it's about, I think, a philosophical question also on how you view, the world, and how you view humanity, and how you view technologically, for example. So from my point of view, I choose to look at this technology as something that can enable me to spend more time with the ones that I love in real life. So not being able to, travel the same ways that I had to before, or to, be more present in the real life is one of the parts where I'm seeing that this technology can really, really help me in my own life. But then also, I think I remember like back 25 years ago when I started working within sales, a very male-dominated occupation as well. And, everyone was there like, oh, it's hustle and grinding and stay late in the office and things like that. I feel like that is very, very outdated. In our own company, we talk much more about kindness and openness, and how can we keep, people who get children and to stay on, and being able to combine both work and family. And, from being a leader the last, I would say 20 years, I've realized that people work so much better if they just feel good about themselves, about their lives. And the work environment is a huge part of that. So see, technology as an enabler. Technology in itself is nothing if we didn't invent it, or if we didn't fill it with content. So from your own point of view, always start with yourself and see what you can do in your little world in that sense. But I'm hoping that this is the era of kindness and openness.
And that it translates into the digital space. And you said it very interestingly a little while ago, that it also, how the tools we've created, they shape us as we use them, right? And that goes for a knife just as much as for a cell phone, right? Like the progress that comes with it then in turn shapes you and your behavior. And so you said it earlier, a lot of these places are male dominated domains, right? Sales was the example just now, but the whole technology space and the gaming space. But you have a background, very much a family background, right? Like you've worked with a media background, but you've worked with modern women media in Sweden. I hope I can pronounce this right. You've worked with another company called Familjeliv. So like very interesting to see that these values of family and the caring and the empathy that you've shared a few times, it's really part of your path. And that is what informs the parts of the metaverse and the parts of the Web3 space that you're building and co-creating.
Yeah, and I think I've always had a sense of not going to work as something that I had very, very early on. I needed to feel like I was going somewhere where I could make a difference, or I was going somewhere with something that I had a passion for. So, I think it's so important to not see yourself going to work in that sense, but going to pursue something, or going to do something that makes you feel better in general about yourself. And to your point, I have two little daughters at home. I want to create a world where they feel safe and they can explore the same way as I have done. and probably even better than myself, because things have changed for the better, I would say.
Beautiful. I'd love to wrap our episode just with maybe one not tech related question for you, Emma. And
Yes.
so when you put your headset aside or you switch off your cell phone, what is your favorite place in nature to spend time with, or to decompress, or to simply arrive in like the moment of now?
I have a favorite place in the south of the Swedish Stockholm archipelago called Tora. It's an old forest by an old beach. And it's just nature, no Wi-Fi, no cell phone, no nothing, just me and nature. And I love spending time there. And I love spending time in general in nature. And I think that every human being needs that. And if we don't get that, we lose connection with ourselves as well.
I can see the forest and at the beach. That's very beautiful. And I like how you said that, right? It's the balance of the two of them. Emma, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing some insights into Warpin and what you're creating, and you know, calling everyone into a co-creative experience as well. What's the best way for people to follow the journey of Warpin and stay, you know, really close to the newness that's happening in the AR and VR space around Warpin Media?
Yeah, well, I think that we are using LinkedIn, I would say, most. So LinkedIn is a good way of following what we're doing and news from there. So people are more than welcome to follow Warpin Media or myself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you very much for having me.